My stepfather thought he'd won, after the judge, his best friend, sent me back. But one whispered sentence to my foster mom took them both to jail. I ran away when I was 12 years old and never once looked back. The punishment room, as my stepfather called it, was nothing more than our cold basement storage area. The floor was cracked concrete, the air had a permanent chill, and the space always smelled of damp cardboard boxes and forgotten things. It was his preferred method of discipline, silent, isolating, and terrifyingly effective. That particular night, I'd committed the crime of studying past 9 p.m. I'd hidden my small desk lamp under layers of clothing, letting just enough glow escape so I could prepare for an important biology test. My stepfather had a strict lights-out rule, more for control than any real concern about my sleep schedule. The moment I felt his hand clamp down on my shoulder, my blood ran cold. "What part of lights out at 9 o'clock don't you understand?" he said softly. He never shouted, he didn't need to. His quiet voice was worse than yelling. "I have a biology test tomorrow," I whispered, my voice trembling, knowing my excuse wouldn't matter. He tightened his grip until pain flared through my shoulder. 3 days without food, he replied evenly. "Maybe then you'll learn how to manage your time better." Without another word, he marched me to the basement door, forced me to watch as he slowly tore each page from my biology textbook, scattering the torn paper onto the floor. "You'll clean this mess tomorrow," he said, shoving me down the stairs before locking the door behind him. This wasn't new, but tonight was different. I had been planning for weeks, slowly loosening the screws of the small basement window that led to the backyard. I had started this after witnessing him throw my mother down those same stairs. Even after that, she had lied to the neighbor, claiming she'd simply tripped. That day I realized nobody was coming to save us. It was up to me. I waited for hours in silence, listening until his breathing machine hummed steadily upstairs, and my mother's anxiety meds had sent her into a deep sleep. Finally, around 3 in the morning, I moved carefully toward the window. My heart pounded with each creak of the old wooden stairs, but when I pressed the window frame, it swung outward without a sound. With just enough room to squeeze through, I took only my school backpack stuffed hastily with clothes, my birth certificate stolen from my mother's filing cabinet, and $340 earned from months of quietly tutoring younger kids at the local library. Mrs. Rodriguez had always paid in cash and pretended not to notice the bruises that covered my arms beneath the sleeves. I didn't dare go to a friend's house. It would have been the first place anyone looked. Instead, I headed straight to school, slipping through the broken gate behind the gymnasium. A week earlier, I'd hidden an old sleeping bag inside the equipment shed, just in case. For 2 weeks, that small dusty shed became home. Every morning I slipped into school early, washed quickly in the athletic locker rooms before classes, and then blended seamlessly into the crowd. I maintained perfect grades, tutored other students during lunch breaks, and did everything possible to stay invisible. Teachers assumed I was fine because my homework was always handed in early, my grades impeccable. Nobody bothered to look closer. Then came the Amber Alert. It happened suddenly during English class. Phones buzzed simultaneously, lighting up the faces of students around me. My face appeared everywhere. Missing child, possible abduction. I felt my stomach twist painfully. That evening, local news stations aired tearful pleas from my stepfather. He held my hollow-eyed mother close, his voice trembling convincingly for the cameras. "Please bring our daughter home," he begged, a perfect mask of concern. The same man who had dislocated my shoulder teaching me to swing a softball bat correctly, the same man who'd let our dog freeze to death outside last winter. The next day at school was a nightmare. Students constantly scanned each other's faces, whispering and speculating. I wore my hoodie pulled low, ate lunch in bathroom stalls, and kept moving, terrified of recognition. My luck finally ran out during my free period. I had drifted into a restless sleep behind the tall shelves of the library's biography section when the librarian, Mrs. Amanda, startled me awake. Recognition dawned clearly in her eyes, but instead of saying anything immediately, she simply walked away. My heart raced, adrenaline surging. I grabbed my bag, ready to flee, but before I could, she returned quietly, compassion etched deeply into her gentle face. "Carara," she said softly, "come to my office, please." With no choice I followed, mentally calculating escape routes. Inside, Mrs. Amanda gently closed the door and lowered the blinds. Her eyes searched mine carefully. "Everyone's looking for you," she said gently, yet her voice held no accusation. I nodded silently. "Are you safe at home?" she asked softly, her voice thick with unspoken concern. I almost lied out of habit, out of fear, but something in her quiet empathy broke through my defenses. Slowly, deliberately, I rolled up my sleeves, revealing the series of small, circular scars burned into my skin from extinguished cigarettes. Then, hesitating only briefly, I lifted my shirt to expose the belt welts across my back. "There's more," I whispered. "But you understand." Without hesitation, she picked up the phone not to call my parents but social services. Then she handed me her own lunch turkey and Swiss on wheat, apple slices on the side. It was the first real meal I'd eaten in days. When social workers arrived, they documented every injury, recording my testimony meticulously. For once, adults listened, believed me. Within hours, police had found evidence corroborating my story. Blood on the basement walls from desperate attempts to escape, a makeshift toilet bucket in the corner, and my mother's suspicious medical records documenting repeated injuries. My stepfather was arrested the same evening. Mrs. Amanda held my trembling hand as we watched him being led away in cuffs. Everyone assured me it was an open and shut case. 20 years, minimum, the prosecutor confidently promised. Then came the trial. Mrs. Amanda and my foster parents supported me quietly from behind. But when the judge entered, my blood froze solid in my veins. I knew him instantly from every smiling photo in my stepfather's home office. It was his closest friend, his college roommate of 30 years. The judge looked directly at me, and with a cold, knowing smile began reading his decision. After reviewing the evidence, I'm ordering immediate family reunification. I felt the world collapse around me, hope slipping rapidly through my fingers. The judge's words reverberated through the courtroom, each syllable echoing ominously in my mind. Family reunification. I was going back to the man who had spent years meticulously destroying my sense of self-worth and safety. My legs felt numb, rooted firmly in place by dread and disbelief. Behind me, Mrs. Amanda surged to her feet, her voice a mix of fury and desperation. "You have to recuse yourself. This is a clear conflict of interest." Her hands gripped the wooden barrier tightly, knuckles white from the strain. Security officers moved swiftly toward her, their intentions clear. The prosecutor frantically searched his files, papers scattering around him like fallen leaves. He found a conflict of interest form, still blank, and his expression darkened in horror. The judge remained eerily calm, reclining slightly as he clarified in a measured, chilling voice. "I have no legal obligation to recuse myself based on a casual acquaintance. There's nothing improper about my involvement here." I saw my stepfather subtly adjust his tie, a faint smirk dancing briefly at the corner of his mouth. The gesture was subtle but chilling. My foster mother grabbed my hand beneath the table, her grip urgent, reassuring despite her trembling fingers. "We'll appeal," she whispered desperately, though the social worker was already approaching, transition paperwork firmly in hand. Mrs. Amanda tried again to intercept, pleading for an audience with the judge in his chambers. Security blocked her path, leading her forcefully from the room. My stepfather rose slowly, the embodiment of false relief. His gaze locked firmly onto mine, silently daring me to resist. In that moment, 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Should I make a scene, validate their accusations that I was an unstable runaway? Or comply quietly, praying for another chance? Across the room, the prosecutor caught my eye. His lips silently formed 2 words. "I'm sorry." With that quiet apology echoing in my head, I chose to remain calm. As security escorted Mrs. Amanda away, I leaned close to my foster parents and whispered urgently, "Check my library cubby." They looked confused, but I could only hope they'd soon understand. The days after returning home were a blur of heightened surveillance. My stepfather instituted random searches, meticulously rifling through my backpack each evening. I anticipated this, hiding crucial evidence in a flash drive filled with recordings inside my calculator. During a brief restroom break at school, I discreetly transferred it to the lining of my shoe, always staying several steps ahead. Then Mrs. Amanda disappeared from school, abruptly barred from the premises following her courtroom outburst. Word spread quickly her position was under immediate review. The loss felt devastating, yet hope sparked anew when the substitute librarian, Ms. Alicia, subtly communicated through a discreet gesture a signal Mrs. Amanda had taught me, indicating a trusted ally. I cautiously responded, confirming her alliance. Ms. Alicia's eyes brightened momentarily with relief and recognition. Quietly, carefully, she passed a coded message during class, confirming she was part of the teacher protection network Mrs. Amanda had established. At home, I made another painful discovery. My mother's medication had tripled, rendering her compliant and barely responsive. My stepfather had essentially weaponized her prescriptions, neutralizing any risk she might present as a witness. Faced with an impossible choice, I decided to secretly intervene. Over weeks I subtly reduced her medication, hiding surplus pills and adjusting the logs to appear normal. Gradually, her alertness returned, prompting suspicion from my stepfather. He quickly arranged an emergency doctor's appointment, intent on restoring his control. However, something significant had changed. During a computer class, I accessed an anonymous email account, carefully evading the school's monitoring systems. Using a memorized contact with the federal prosecutor, I sent a brief yet urgent message. Evidence available, urgent. The response was swift and concise, instructing me to leave evidence at a grocery store drop site frequented by Mrs. Amanda. Taking advantage of my mother's newfound lucidity, we visited the store under the guise of routine shopping. There I discreetly deposited the hidden flash drive containing recordings that meticulously detailed my stepfather's abuse and manipulation. Days later, federal marshals swarmed the judge's home during his weekly poker game, arresting him in a public spectacle. My stepfather watched helplessly as his closest ally was dragged into the national spotlight, the scandal exploding into a full-fledged investigation. The case rapidly escalated. A new judge renowned for advocating child welfare and impartiality took charge, scheduling an emergency hearing. My stepfather had just 3 days to prepare, which meant 3 days of escalating control, frantic desperation, and potential violence. But the tide had undeniably turned. The upcoming hearing was now a national interest, attracting intense media scrutiny and comprehensive federal oversight. The small family court had transformed into a battleground for justice. Hope, though cautious and fragile, had returned, brighter and stronger than ever. The courtroom was transformed the day of the emergency hearing. Federal prosecutors occupied seats beside local officials, child advocates crowded the gallery, and journalists lined the back rows, notebooks ready and cameras rolling. This was no longer a quiet family matter. It had become a public reckoning. My mother testified first. With her medication properly managed under medical supervision, she described clearly the years of emotional manipulation, physical abuse, and control exerted by my stepfather. Her voice trembled when recounting the night she found me in the basement. Bloodied hands scraping desperately against concrete walls. When the prosecutors played my recorded evidence, silence blanketed the room. My voice filled the courtroom, calmly detailing each horrific event. I described the punishments, the isolation, and my mother's forced sedation. My words hung heavily in the air, undeniable and damning. My stepfather's lawyer desperately attempted to portray me as troubled and unreliable, grasping at straws to discredit the overwhelming evidence. But medical records didn't lie. X-rays revealing healed fractures. Photographs documenting cigarette burns. Scars clearly marking years of trauma. Finally, it was my turn to testify. The prosecutor questioned me gently, but thoroughly. I rolled up my sleeves once more, showing scars both old and new. I spoke clearly, recounting each horrific experience with steady composure. When I described the soundproof basement, a recent chilling modification my stepfather had made, my stepfather leaped from his seat, losing all composure. "Ungrateful liar," he roared, his carefully constructed mask shattered completely. Court officers swiftly restrained him as he continued to shout denials and threats, his true nature finally exposed. The new judge's decision came swiftly and unequivocally. Immediate removal from my stepfather's custody, recommended criminal charges, and conditional custody granted to my mother, provided she continued therapy and supervision. Relief flooded through me as court officers led my stepfather away, handcuffed and furious. Mrs. Amanda was waiting outside, her reinstatement complete following the arrest of the corrupt judge. Now serving as my educational advocate, she embraced me fiercely, whispering, "You did it. You're safe now." In the months that followed, our lives gradually stabilized. My mother committed fully to therapy, steadily regaining her independence and strength. My foster parents became a permanent part of our support network, guiding us through recovery. Eventually, my stepfather faced trial and received a 15-year sentence. Meanwhile, my bruises healed, grades recovered, and life settled into a comforting routine. At school, I noticed other kids quiet, withdrawn, with shadows behind their eyes similar to mine. During lunch breaks, I tutored them quietly, teaching them chemistry while discreetly guiding them on documenting abuse, seeking allies like Mrs. Amanda, and never giving up. I carried a calculator with a hidden compartment not for my own evidence anymore, but containing emergency contacts for those students. It was a small gesture, but I hoped it might give them the strength to find their own paths to safety. Justice, I learned, wasn't guaranteed. It had to be fought for. But it was possible, especially when we refused to be silent. As I packed up my books one afternoon, my phone buzzed a text from my mother telling me dinner was ready. Walking home to a house now filled with warmth and hope, I knew I'd reclaimed my life. The frightened child who had crawled through that basement window felt distant, but her courage remained close, a constant reminder of the strength it took not just to survive, but to thrive and to help others do the same. Just when I thought my life had finally reached a place of peace, reality crashed through once more, shattering the fragile normalcy I'd built. It started subtly, a feeling of being watched, vague discomfort I couldn't quite pinpoint. At first, I dismissed it as residual paranoia from my past, convincing myself that years of trauma couldn't just vanish overnight. But then, anonymous notes began appearing in my locker at school, cryptic messages reminding me ominously, "It's not over yet." Fear seeped slowly back into my life, tightening its grip with every passing day. I tried to hide my anxiety from my mother and Mrs. Amanda, desperate to protect the newfound stability we'd fought so hard for. But my mask slipped one evening when my mother found me pale and shaking after discovering another note tucked inside my textbook. Together, we went immediately to the authorities, but there was little they could do without tangible evidence. The notes were clean, no fingerprints, no clues to their origin. Security cameras at school showed nothing unusual, leaving me feeling more vulnerable than ever. My anxiety spiraled when I received a chilling message on my phone. "You destroyed my family, now I'll destroy yours." My heart sank. The sender was anonymous, but the threat was unmistakably real. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone connected to my stepfather's past was behind this. The investigation eventually revealed a harrowing truth. My stepfather's younger brother, whom I'd never met and barely knew existed, had silently been watching from the shadows, consumed by vengeance for what he saw as my betrayal. Obsessed and resentful, he blamed me entirely for his brother's imprisonment. He'd been meticulously planning his revenge for months, driven by the twisted belief that destroying my life would somehow vindicate his brother's actions. Authorities apprehended him just before his threats could escalate into physical harm. But the damage was done. The fragile sense of safety I'd fought for had been shattered yet again. Even as the police led him away, the raw wounds reopened, forcing me to confront once more the painful reality of how deeply trauma could embed itself. Recovery, I realized, was not linear. Safety was not guaranteed. It was something I would have to constantly fight for. This time, however, I wasn't alone. My mother, Mrs. Amanda, my foster parents, and even the kids I'd quietly helped all stood beside me, forming an unbreakable shield of support. Together, we took the necessary steps forward, reaffirming that no matter how many times darkness returned, I would never again face it alone. In the wake of that final, terrifying confrontation, a profound shift occurred, not only within myself but also within my community. Media attention returned once more, this time highlighting resilience and hope rather than tragedy. My story was shared widely, transforming from a narrative of victimhood to one of empowerment and courage. I began receiving letters from others who'd endured similar hardships, thanking me for speaking out and showing them they weren't alone. Inspired, I collaborated with Mrs. Amanda, my mother, and local child advocacy groups to establish a community initiative aimed at supporting young survivors of abuse. We named it the Hope Initiative, a resource hub and safe space offering counseling, legal support, educational resources, and mentorship programs. It quickly grew into a vibrant center, funded by donations from people who believed in our mission. One evening, standing before an auditorium filled with survivors, supporters, and friends, I shared my journey openly. I spoke of the fear, the setbacks, but most importantly, the unyielding strength found in community and compassion. "My past does not define me," I said firmly, my voice steady and confident. "And neither does yours. Together, we reclaim our lives. Together, we heal. Together, we ensure no one ever faces this alone." The applause that erupted was overwhelming, not just because of support for me, but because of what it represented: hope, solidarity, and transformation. In that moment, I knew I'd reclaimed not just my own story, but helped countless others begin to rewrite theirs. Today, as I walk through the doors of the Hope Initiative each morning, greeting familiar faces and welcoming new ones, I realize my journey wasn't about escaping the past. It was about transforming pain into purpose. And in choosing my purpose, I found my peace.